All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Training Industry Leader Talk on Sales Training and Enablement, brought to you by Sales Readiness Group, Ignite Selling, Allego, and Sandler Training. I'm Elizabeth Parker, Marketing and Event Manager at Training Industry. I'll be co-hosting today's event with my colleague, Sarah Gallo, and we are so happy you have decided to join us today. Super excited to hear what our four speakers have in store for us for today's event. Before we get started with our first session, though, I'd just like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items that will help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of your time with us. Throughout today's event, please feel free to chat any comments you have in the chat window and submit your questions in the Q&A window. I'll be monitoring those comments throughout and saving your questions for Q&A towards the end of our session. I do encourage you to share the information you received today via social media by following our handle Training Industry. That's just Training Industry without the Y. And we'll be engaging in that Twitter conversation throughout the event, so please feel free to join in there. At the end of your time with us, you'll notice a brief evaluation survey has popped open in your browser. We would greatly welcome your feedback about today's event. And lastly, all of the sessions are being recorded, will be archived on trainingindustry.com. You'll receive a follow-up email from us as soon as those are available to you. I know a lot of you, this is your first event with Training Industry, so a special welcome to you. Training Industry exists to support the learning leader. We offer timely and insightful information on the business of learning through live events like today's virtual conference, as well as through website articles and magazine articles, research reports, blog posts, referral services. We have a podcast, that's just to name a few. You can find all of the ways that we connect you with expert perspectives in the industry at trainingindustry.com. And of course, today's event is made possible by our sponsors. So before we get started here is a brief message from Ignite Selling.
Ignite Selling prepares your team to scale your mountains to help you achieve your business goals. But like mountains, business goals aren't all the same, and each must be attacked differently. So before your guide can prepare you for your specific journey, you better know where you want to go so that you can make sure that you get what you need to be successful. Most sales training programs, like a climbing practice wall, are built only once and are used over and over again to teach basic principles. The problem is they're not specific to the needs of the journey or to the thrill seekers using them. Sure, most training programs can be tweaked or customized, but like a rock wall where the route can be modified, they don't fully prepare you for the real deal, like crossing an icy crevasse or for digging an emergency ice cave. Ignite Selling first wants to know which mountains you plan on climbing, and only then do we develop the training to help you reach the summit. We focus on the tools and best practices that you need for that specific journey. We might learn figure-8 knots and bowlines, study survival skills, or evaluate the equipment you'll need on your trek. But this knowledge transfer is only the beginning. Real expeditions have real dangers, and mistakes can cost you. We'll build a simulation so your team can experience what it's really like on that mountain of yours. Whether your business goal is like a small hill in the Appalachians, a treacherous climb in the Alps, or a high-altitude adventure in the Himalayas, we'll take your people there and give them real-world experience in a safe, simulated environment. At this point, you will feel so prepared that you want nothing else but to take on your beast of a mountain. And you can count on Ignite Selling to be with you throughout your journey. We have the experience, the knowledge, and the commitment to ignite your sales force and get your company right where you want it, on top of a mountain. Pushing for outcomes through customized simulation training. Ignite Selling, sales simulations that inspire.
All right, and now without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to your speakers, Steve Gielda and Tim Carlson. For 25 years, Steve has been helping companies improve their sales performance. The success he has achieved in his career comes from enabling clients to meet their business goals. At his core, Steve is a salesman. He loves working with clients, understanding their needs, and helping them solve problems. Steve started his career at Lanier Worldwide, pounding the pavement and knocking on doors. His experience at Lanier taught him the power of client relationships and the importance of persistence. He also learned the importance of effective sales leadership, which helped him transition from district manager to regional vice president of sales. And Tim Carlson has worked for over 20 years to build programs, curriculum, and learning experiences across a variety of high-tech companies. While initially focused on enabling customers to be successful in leveraging products and solutions, his charter rapidly expanded to include the onboarding and ongoing enablement of employees across the organization, and most uniquely the sales team. Over the last 10 years, Tim has continued to refine and focus his work in sales enablement entirely, leveraging the elements of traditional adult learning to drive hybrid learning solutions for a global, diverse sales organization. For Tim, there is still no greater satisfaction than seeing those aha moments come to life in the classroom and in practice in the real world. Both Steve and Tim, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm going to hand this over to you now.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you, Sarah, for allowing us this opportunity to speak with the members of Training Industry. And thank you so much for all of you guys who have decided to invest a little bit of time on your own in helping you guys get just a little bit smarter on what has to happen in order to help you improve the effectiveness of your own sales organization. So as a way to kind of get started, let me just share with you just a couple of final moments here of a commercial about Ignite Selling, and then we'll jump right into it. You know, 3 things about Ignite Selling is that we have over 23 years of experience of primarily working in the tech, financial, and healthcare marketplace. We have worked in several other different industries, but those are the core industries to which we really focus. The majority of our client relationships are established around. And number 2 is the fact that we help develop custom sales training that are developed through virtual and classroom simulations. We can talk a little bit about what's the term of simulation, what do simulations really mean at another time. And then finally, the last thing is that we do is we don't believe that people learn through PowerPoint. We believe that people learn through doing. So everything that we do, even in this virtual world, we use what we call interactive learning maps or capstone simulations to drive learning. So it's no longer about the PowerPoint and the role plays and those kinds of things. We really believe in putting people into an environment that really helps them be more successful. These are some of the clients we're currently actively working with today. Some of the other names that you might recognize. But let's kind of get into exactly why we're here. There was 3 commitments that Tim and I are going to make for you today. Number 1 is we want to provide you a pathway to effectively leverage each stage of your pipeline process, because it's all about maintaining pipeline momentum. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we leverage each stage. Number 2, we're going to talk about is how do we better support the sales reps in gaining access and managing the influencers involved in the customer's decision process. And number 3, we want to make sure that we can help provide you with a set of tools that helps your sales representatives do a better job of identifying the decision criteria that their customers are using to compare them against the competition. So that's our commitment for you today. So let's get started. You know, one of the things we talked about in this thing is all about accelerating the pipeline. So best place we felt to start is to start off by asking the question, why do opportunities stall? Well, there's been a lot of research out there. Harvard Business Review published some research recently that says 61% of executives admit that their sales managers have not been adequately trained to effectively manage the pipeline. Now, what does that really mean? We're going to get into that in just a little bit. Other researchers simply say the reason that opportunities stall in the pipeline could be any number of these other reasons. Customer has no need to change. Customers don't like saying no, so therefore they kind of keep the sales representative on the line unnecessarily long. Salesperson's not really talking to the right people. Client's protocols require 3 different quotes. A lot of different reasons or maybe even excuses as to why opportunities have a tendency to stall. Well, we did our own research, and Ignite Selling does a lot of win-loss analyses. We want to know when our clients win, why did they win? And when they lost, why did they lose? And from this, we begin to kind of explore and kind of peel out some of the real data behind why do opportunities stall. Well, when we did our research, we asked 5 questions. The same 5 questions that we ask account managers, we asked their customers. And I want to share with you the results of kind of what some of this data shares with us. These are the 5 questions. Now, what I want to do is I want to go through each one of these 5 questions with you quickly. And I want to go ahead and share with you what the responses are between the account manager and the customer. Now, these are the exact same account manager and customer's response. So I'd be real curious to kind of take a look at these responses. Number one, question is what was driving the sense of urgency to decide to make a decision to buy now? Sales representative says, well, they had money they had to spend before the end of the year. Same customer tells us government regulations changed and we're losing patients to competitive hospitals. The sense of urgency was very different from the customer's standpoint as to why they had to act now. Next question we asked is, how many people are involved in the decision-making process? Sales representative says there are 4 people involved: vice president of finance, COO, IT manager, senior systems engineer. 4 people. Customer, same customer, we asked, they said there are 5 people involved: CFO, COO, director of systems engineering, legal counsel, and advisor. Look at this, how different are these responses between this account manager and their customer? We asked another question: which 3 people had the greatest influence on the decision, and in order of influence? Sales representatives, the COO, IT manager, and VP of finance. Those are the top 3 people. Customer, same account, says director of systems engineering, the advisor, and the CFO. We want to know why opportunities are stalling. Here's just some insights into why this might be happening. Next question is what's the decision criteria the customer is using to compare you against the competition, and in order of importance? Sales rep tells us price, number 1 most important factor, followed by integration, followed by the comment, that's all that mattered. Because I wanted to know what maybe the top 3 to 5 decision criteria. Sales representative tells us price and integration. Customer's response was a little bit more lengthy. Security, number 1 most important, followed by recovery time, price, training, and experience in the industry. Sales representative thought price was the number 1 most important decision criteria, and frankly, they had 2 other most important decision criteria, such as security and recovery time, that was more important than price. And then final question is, why do you believe the salesperson, what do you believe is the salesperson's company's greatest strength? So we asked the sales rep, what's their greatest strength? In the eyes of this customer, they said, this customer likes us because of speed of procedure. Customer tells us recovery time and support. So we want to know why opportunities have a tendency to stall. This kind of gives you a little bit of a peek into the window, is that maybe sales representatives don't have their full arms wrapped around the opportunities, and thus could be causing the reasons to stall. All of our findings, this just gives you a little glimpse into it. All of our findings is kind of boiled down into 5 factors. Number 1, sales representatives assumed that they understood what was driving the customer's sense of urgency. Number 2, they as reps lacked an understanding of the customer's business metrics. What are the key metrics that they're trying to really drive? Number 3, reps assumed they knew the decision criteria. Number 4, reps missed opportunities to quantify value. In other words, those unique differentiators, they missed the opportunity to quantify value. And number 5, reps assumed their adversaries were neutralized and that they knew all of the key influencers involved. So let's hear from Tim just for a moment. Tim, we've done some work together and some of your time when we were at Netscope, but can you share with the group why you believe sales teams are often making the assumptions throughout the pipeline process?
Sure. So, I think when you really boil it down, it comes down to 3 main factors. There's the pressure to deliver, which, that's eternal. That's why we hire them, right? Quota attainment, net new logos, activity levels, things like that. But digging a little deeper, you got things like, are they comfortable not only in what they're selling and who they're selling to, but who they're selling against, which ties into marketing and comp intel. And then lastly, and probably most relevant to what we're talking about here, is the ambiguity of what it actually means to be each step of the process, right? And so, all 3 of these are interconnected. And but let's just focus on those last 2. Pressure is always going to be there. First and foremost, understanding who within the opportunity to sell to, it's a given. You better know who the heck you're selling to. But the reality is, it's growing more and more complex every day. So the person you sold to a year ago is probably different than the person or persons you are going to have to sell to today. And what this typically, in our case at Netscope, where we're selling a very disruptive network technology, You're literally going in and you're upending literal decades of dogma of how to secure your network. So now, instead of selling to like your IT individual who you typically would sell to, now you're selling not only across the whole enterprise into other groups who have a stake in this, but also up and down the chain, C-level, senior management, finance, legal, etc. It's a bit of a three-dimensional chess game sometimes. So you're no longer selling to the same people. Influencers have changed significantly. Second is that lack of a clear, mutually agreed upon criteria for every step of your process. It's absolutely critical for success. The problem is a lot of companies, they'll put together a sales process and charge off into the field and do their day job. And typically what happens is shortly thereafter, they're starting to build exceptions and loopholes and workarounds because, well, that process doesn't completely work exactly as we want it to. Problem is, soon you end up with a process that's got more loopholes than standards, and exceptions rule the day.
Yeah.
Businesses expand and contract in a variety of ways over time, and there's hardly a process out there that's going to always be able to adapt. So you have to look at your sales process as something that is a living, breathing thing, not a one and done type of scenario.
Right.
So just
Yeah,
one last one. And in the end, I think it really comes down to the sellers not being really fully aware of who influences the final decision, what their needs are, and how you address them. And a well thought out sales process with various checkpoints and criteria can help address those at the right time, at the right place.
Tim, such on point comments there. Let's give people a little bit deeper dive into when we're talking about some of the things you're talking about, the milestones and clarity around the sales process. What are we really talking about here? So what Tim's really referring to is we talk about a sales process, it's critical. Oh, is that right? Yep, I'm sorry. I tell you what, let's go into our first poll here. Sorry about that. But I do want to build upon what Tim was saying. Let's go into our first poll. Here's the first poll question. If you were to ask 5 sales managers in your company, what must happen to move an opportunity from stage 2, whatever that might be, to stage 3, would you get a consistent answer? Absolutely, maybe, or not a chance. So as you guys are answering that question, we'll give you just a couple of minutes. Tim, when you were talking about this, the question popped up in the poll from Michael Brandon, I think the name was. And he asked the questions, do you think that this is just as relevant in this kind of post-pandemic marketplace as it was pre-pandemic? Some of the things that you're talking about.
I think absolutely. And actually, if nothing else, I think it provides a finer focus on it. Our sales organization, like many, are having to do their jobs in a 100% virtual environment. This is our friend, right? And it takes a different perspective. You don't have that in-person relationship and body language and so on, and that it's funneled through a webcam, right?
Correct.
Worse yet, just through audio. So I think it really challenges even more, and I think it makes it puts more onus on the sales process to be able to really dig in and determine, okay, where are they really at? And
great point.
Unfortunately, you've got fewer data points to work with.
Great point. Okay, Elizabeth, let's take a look at the results.
Here they are.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So let's take a look at these things. So majority of you guys say maybe, and that's probably the most accurate answer, because in most cases, you might be getting, in some cases, a good answer, but in other cases, you might not. That 38% of you simply say not a chance. And I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. But I think a lot of it stems from the point that we talked about, was around this whole notion around having clarity. You heard Tim talk about this just for a moment. Let's take a look at a little deeper dive here. Clarity begins with making sure that we have clear understanding of how we define each stage. The clarity that Tim was talking about was really specific to defining each stage with a set of milestones, which we're going to define in just a moment. But in short, milestones are some of these things that you see in these bullets. They are things that we define as a critical action that, if not taken, puts the opportunity at risk of being lost or risk of being stalled. So your milestones are those critical actions that, if not taken, put your opportunity at risk. So let's take a look at this. Why are these things so critically important? Well, it really helps from a management standpoint, provides kind of a coaching path for this. If Tim was my manager and he was to ask me, Steve, what stage is this opportunity in? I may tell him, hey, I have this opportunity in the strategize stage. Well, what I've just told Tim is that I have therefore met all of the milestones in the qualify and the discover stage. Tim, being a good manager, isn't just going to inspect what he expects by simply saying, following this example, what is the decision criteria the customer is using other than price? Tim is going to ask a question that simply says, Steve, so if you've identified the decision criteria, how does the decision criteria differ between the top two key influencers? Well, either I know the answer to that or I don't. If I don't know the answer to that, maybe that opportunity should maybe not be in stage 3. And therefore, if I don't know the answer to that, maybe the opportunity is getting stalled. So when we're talking about milestones, what are we really defining as milestones? Well, milestones are individual stepping stones that help guide the sales representative along their path so that they don't skip steps that cause opportunities to stall. It's all about accelerating the process. So when we follow a process, just like a recipe, you have greater results. By skipping steps, you change the outcome. Any of you guys who are into cooking, I'm here in Austin, Texas. I've really got into smoking, briskets and ribs and those kinds of things. But if I skip steps along the way and I don't say trim the fat from the brisket before I smoke it, guess what? I'm going to get a very different output. But I know that if the recipe says I need to make sure that I follow those steps, things are going to go well if in fact I follow the steps properly. So Tim, from your perspective, when you look at the sales processes that we've installed together, and in the essence of time, give me just the response from the managers.
Sure.
What's been the greatest benefit from the managers when in fact we've installed a well-defined sales process?
I think what the managers tend to walk away with, or what I've heard from various ones that I've trained over the years, is they're able to shift their time around as to how they work with their sales rep, moving away from more of the tactical, are you sure it's this number? Are you sure it's this date, etc., into being able to be more of a mentor and a coach, right? And helping them on building the strategy around that opportunity versus more of the tactical dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and I think it also helps the rep and the manager approach this stuff better in a way that they can identify issues that are forthcoming, and hopefully within time they can course correct. They can be much more dynamic in how they respond. Many industries like mine, they tend to have long ramp times for new hires, and that tends to be mirrored with long sales cycles. So having a good mix of those checkpoints that give you leading and lagging indicators, they're critical for success of your reps, driving quota attainment, and really maximizing the return on investment you're making for your reps, both new and existing. So really at its core, a self-defined sales process not only removes that ambiguity, but it broadens the scope of the rep-manager relationship.
We all know that kind of relationship needs to be more than just simply what's going on in this account, right? It needs to be one of where there's value in that coaching relationship, right? That the rep can turn to the manager and actually find some kind of strategic support or help in helping them accelerate that opportunity through the pipeline. So let's go through our next poll. Next poll for you guys says, how would you respond to this question? My sales team effectively leverages their advocates and neutralizes their adversaries in early in the process. Is they absolutely do this? Sometimes they do this, or there's not a chance that the sales team effectively leverages their advocates and neutralizes their adversaries. What do you think? Absolutely do it all the time. Sometimes they do it, or not a chance they're proactively leveraging their advocates, neutralizing their adversaries. Tim, this is one of the areas that as you know, that we work very hard with the clients, the accounts that we've worked on and the reps we worked on with you guys. It'd be really interesting as we get into this in just a moment to kind of get your perspective on what are the assumptions that salespeople are making about this notion of truly leveraging their advocates or even neutralizing their adversaries. But let's take a look at the results first. Elizabeth, what do we got? Okay, so again, sometimes, you know what, we're really kind of put at risk when in fact we have sometimes our sales representatives are proactively neutralizing their adversaries, or neutralizing their adversaries, or even leveraging their advocates. It's so critical for us to be more thoughtful and more proactive in this thing on an ongoing basis. But we often find that they don't do this consistently enough because they lack a tool or a process that can help them do that. So let's get back into this, and let's kind of talk a little bit about this whole notion of managing key influencers and the impact that that has on kind of slowing down the sales process and the sales pipeline. You know, it's no longer just enough to know who those key influencers are, but we need to know how do we best manage those individuals. Now, there's a tool that we call influencer snapshot. It's a simple 2x2 representation of the relationships that we have around the key influencers in terms of what's their level of influence, what's the level of advocacy, so that we can build a smart plan of action. Now, we call this a snapshot tool because it is just a snapshot in time. If we are remodeling a home, this might be the snapshot before. And then there'll be maybe several other snapshots before we get to what this looks like after the fact. Well, just like in business, a snapshot might look like this, where we have some high influencer adversaries. And what we need to really do is eventually change the picture so that we're neutralizing some of those folks. So we call this thing the influencer snapshot. And the influencer snapshot is a way of breaking the assumptions around your sales reps and who is really important. There's 4 ways that with which this tool can help accelerate revenue. Number 1, it helps validate who's really important, okay, as opposed to maybe who's just a user of our product. If you ask sales representatives who are the advocates inside their account, you know, in many cases, they're going to simply give you the names of the people that support their product. Just because they support the product doesn't necessarily mean that they are willing to go to bat for your company. Doesn't mean that they're willing to go put their butt on the line to simply say, I think we need to use product A or product B. Sometimes people just don't want to get involved, and that's fine. But let's not assume that they are truly a strong advocate of ours as opposed to simply just a champion of your product. Number 2, encourages reps to move beyond their comfort zone. You know, we often find sales representatives getting stuck in the trap of only talking to the people that are willing to talk to them. Number 3, challenges the reps to think more strategic about how are they going to neutralize their adversaries. And number 4, it helps eliminate surprises. If you ask your sales representatives today, for the most part, who has high influence, who has low influence, who loves them and who doesn't, sales representatives are going to be able to give you an answer. The question is it right? So let's just take a look at this picture for a moment. Let's suppose the sales representative gives us this picture. Is this picture overly favorable? Well, not really. 4 out of the top 6 key influencers are really on this adversarial side of the picture. 2 of the top highest influencers are not supporters of ours. However, there are some positive things here. The number 2 most high influential individual, the COO, is a supporter of ours. Now, do we know why? Do we know, are they willing to go talk to this VP of Finance or the CTO? Well, what do we do about this picture? So when we're introducing this particular model and helping people think through this, we simply ask them the question, what do you need to do to improve this picture? And maybe one person says, we need to go through this stage. Maybe somebody else says, this is a better idea. We're going to reduce the level of influence of the VP of Finance by raising the level of influence of others. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but I challenge you guys to think about, do you ever have a situation where you have more than one account manager or one sales representative selling into an account? Do they have differences of opinion about where these people fall on the snapshot tool? Who's right? Person A or person B? And if they can't agree upon where these people fall, do they have the right strategy? Would they agree upon what's the best strategy to neutralize the VP of Finance like in this situation? So Tim, I've got a question for you. What was your most common assumption that you saw in your sales teams falling into prior to implementing the influencer snapshot?
I think many of the points that you just made, really, it's getting blindsided by an influencer that they either were not aware of or just really didn't have an understanding of where they were in the hierarchy. As I was saying, like in our sector, the number of decision makers involved has expanded significantly, and it's not all techie folks. There's legal, there's finance, there's operations, there's all these other groups involved. And not having a clear picture of where they are in the pecking order definitely stalls opportunities for sure. And it really behooves the sales rep to not just understand the financials of the company and the traditional stuff, but also the more for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of the pop culture stuff happening right now. Are they being acquired? Did they acquire someone? Have they had a data breach or something like that? Those can pull in different people into the conversation that you have to have as a rep that historically might not be there.
Tim, I think that's so true. I want to ask you a follow-up question. William Brandon has a question, but I'll ask you this question while we're going into our next poll. So let's go into our next poll. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go past this slide. Let's go into our next poll. The poll is do your sales representatives know the decision criteria their customers are using to compare their solution against the competition? So there's a poll question for you. All right. Do they know? Now, Tim, I want to ask you a question while this is being completed here. William asked the question, how do you get sales managers comfortable with this instead of focusing on deals? In other words, how do they get comfortable with using the influencer snapshot to help manage the key influencers in the opportunity, as opposed to simply just focusing on the deal, what the revenue looks like, when is it going to be closed, what products are we talking about? But what do you need to do to get managers more comfortable in that? Can you give me 30 seconds on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think the thing that will make or break any process or tool like this is that manager enablement. Because at the end of the day, if the manager is not holding their feet to the fire to follow a process or submit other inputs or forms like that, it's going to go right out the door. The reps are not going to do it. They're going to do what is going to keep their boss off their butt. Let's be honest. So really equipping those managers with the tools to know the right types of questions to ask and when, I think is absolutely critical. And I think that's where they really start to get the value, and it becomes more of a strategic discussion than a tactical discussion.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I'm going to go back just one slide here. Thank you for that. And this might also this might also kind of help for those of you who are really kind of thinking about how do you get managers more involved here. Well, here are 6 coaching questions. You're going to get access to these coaching questions regarding how to manage key influencers. Your managers should be asking these types of questions. This gets them away from focusing on the deal and more focusing on how do you be a strategy coach. So you're going to get access to these things. So William, hopefully this will be helpful to you as well as the response that Tim provided. Well, let's take a look at our results from our poll. So the question again was, do your sales reps know the decision criteria their customers are using to compare their solution against the competition? Again, in this particular case, it really comes down to maybe. And we really can no longer accept kind of that they might understand the decision criteria. What's really at risk if they don't understand the decision criteria? Somebody said it earlier in the chat, is the fact that the results of this is the fact that they merely end up blaming price as to reasons why they lost. Well, when we ask our sales representative, when we ask in our win-loss analysis, this results to this question, 71% of the account managers said they lost because the provider provided a lower cost Q&A. Okay. In addition to that, my timer is going off. Bear with me a moment. Dismiss. Okay, sorry about that. All right. The other thing was when asked what the decision criteria was the customer was using to compare them against other than price, sales representative didn't know. In other words, we asked the question, other than price, what was the decision criteria customer was using? And then we asked the question, whose criteria is this? What criteria did this customer believe was our strongest attribute? And because they didn't know the answer to these questions, they often have a tendency to blame price. Well, I want to introduce you to another simple 2x2 matrix. We call this the competitive snapshot. In the essence of time, let me just kind of walk you through this. We first of all need to kind of find out, what is the customer's decision criteria? Well, in this particular case, the customer's decision criteria in order of importance is product safety, followed by overall cost, ease of use, ROI, breadth of offerings, and post-sale support. And if you look at this, how does the customer rank us? Does the customer compare us to be comparatively good or comparatively bad when comparing us to the competition? Well, we're really pretty good in product safety, breadth of offerings, and ROI. The good news is the number one most important criteria this customer is using to compare us against the competition is product safety. However, overall cost, ease of use, post-sale support are also very important to this customer. And their perception is that we're not very good at it. So once we get this picture drawn, what do we do about it? Well, one idea might be is to come up with this kind of a plan. Is that we need to strengthen our position around product safety. We need to redefine how they're looking at cost, redefine of how they're perceiving us, and products easy to use, etc. Maybe another strategy is to do this. Let's take overall cost out of the picture by raising the level of importance of ease of use and ROI and breadth of offerings. Whose strategy is right? Well, there's not a right or wrong, but some answers are going to be better than others based upon the opportunity. So, Tim, I'm going to forego this last question for you because of time, and I'm sure questions will kind of come up into the group. But let me just throw these 6 questions out to the group. You can just kind of take a look at. These are 6 questions that managers should be asking sales representatives to help accelerate their pipeline. Questions such as, when considering all the key influencers, whose decision criteria matters most? What's the best way to reduce the importance of a decision criteria where the customer perceives you as weak? These are questions that managers should be asking to help their people become better critical thinkers. So I want to now kind of hit the pause button. Let me summarize real quick, and then we'll go to some Q&A here. The summary is this. It all starts with challenging the assumptions of your sales reps in 3 areas. Number 1, is the opportunity in the right stage? Challenging reps thinking around what stage they should be in and what do they need to do to move forward is absolutely critical. Number 2, have they neutralized their adversaries? Most salespeople will engage with only those people, as Tim said, that they like or who are willing to engage with them. That's not enough. And number 3, do they know the decision criteria the customer is using to compare them against the competition? Because in absence of knowing this decision criteria, they will often blame price. So let me pause, and now let's turn to a few Q&A. So I'm going to turn this back over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do you have any questions for Tim from the panel, for Tim and I?
I sure do. I've got a few questions here in the queue for you. Let's see, your first one came from Suprit, who wanted to know, can you talk a little bit about how your strategy might be different when there are different portfolio account managers are working on one single customer?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think when you have different account managers working on one customer, this type of strategic thinking becomes so critically important because they're all often going to have different assumptions that they're making. You know, somebody might assume, if Tim and I are working on the same account, Tim might assume somebody is a great advocate of ours. I'm going to simply say, based upon my experience in working this account, this guy's not only an advocate, he is as strong of an adversary as we can get. Well, who's right, Tim or myself? Tools like this, the influencer snapshot or the competitive snapshot, or even the milestones in the sales process, provide a dialogue opportunity for Tim and I to explore very specific things about this opportunity and to decide who's right. And if neither of us know we're right, we have to come up with a plan. How do we go validate whether Tim is right or Steve is right? So thanks for the question.
Perfect. Thanks for the answer, Steve. Let's see. Here's a question from Whit, who wants to know, what should a sales manager do to help prevent opportunities from getting stuck or stalled in the process?
Tim, you want to take that one? What should sales managers do to help prevent opportunities getting stuck or stalled in the process?
I think, from the conversations I've had with some of the sales leaders I've worked with, one of the things that we did as part of the Ignite program is this 3D questioning model, this dissecting discussions, which we've touched on a little bit here, because, it's more than just a list of questions. It's really to, provoke thought and debate and discussion about, well, okay, great, you say this, but what if, what if it's not exactly how you spell it out? And I think having a framework that a manager can very quickly, a job aid, for lack of a better way of putting it, that they can pull out of their pocket and say, okay, let's dissect this. It's stuck here. You think it says, what if it's not? What else could it be? I think the framework that we put together was fantastic for helping really analyze those things and hopefully get it unstuck.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. All right, we've got lots of great questions rolling in here for you, so I'm going to keep these coming. Here's one from Jose who wants to know, what do you do when a company forces you to take actions based on short-term metrics, such as like your quota, instead of developing the account into the long term?
What was the first part of that question? What do you do?
When a company is forcing a salesperson to take actions based on shorter term metrics, like a quota.
Yeah. I mean, the reality of it is businesses are driven off of quotas, okay? And we're not going to be able to avoid trying to de-emphasize the importance of a quota. However, what we can do is when we work with organizations, we start building out that sales process, it begins to help the senior leadership team recognize that there are critical milestones that must be taken. And if these critical milestones are not taken, we're only focused on closing the deal, we end up finding ourselves losing more deals or opportunities getting stalled because there isn't a clear understanding from senior leadership down to the frontline salespeople in terms of the actions that need to be taken. So my recommendation to you guys would be is to get senior leadership's involvement in identifying what are the critical milestones that sales representatives must take so that there is a common understanding that it's not always about just closing the deal. We will close more deals if, in fact, we all can agree upon what are the critical milestones that need to be taking place and how long will it take. Senior sales leaders might say it takes 6 weeks. Sales representatives around the field who have experience are simply saying, you know what, it's more like 3 months. Who's right? Well, build out the sales process and see if you can go ahead and find an answer there.
Great. All right, here's a question from Chuck who wants to know, does selling in this virtual world change the approach using these concepts you have presented today?
I think Tim said it earlier, that it probably puts a brighter spotlight on the importance of these types of tools. What's been very interesting since the pandemic, we have probably spent more time helping clients redefine their sales process and provide tools to help accelerate that process more during this pandemic than pre-pandemic. And the reason being is that organizations are looking at what should my sales team be doing be focused on right now. Early in the pandemic, we found that salespeople had a lot of time on their hands because they couldn't go meet with customers. And it exposed the fact that sales representatives didn't know what they should be doing or could be doing in the midst of this kind of a time of uncertainty. So what we started kind of focusing on is asking the questions. What stage is this opportunity in today? If in fact this pandemic ends tomorrow, can you pick up exactly where you left off, or is there some work that needs to be done? Well, we come to find out that the opportunities are in stage today, or they say are maybe in the stage 3 or 4 out of maybe 6 stages. And they haven't even neutralized their adversaries yet. Well, take advantage of this time right now and start developing a plan, talking to your advocates on what do you need to do to neutralize an adversaries, or what do you need to do to identify the business metrics behind this decision. So we have spent more time refining and putting a finer point on client sales processes in 2020 than we ever have since we started doing this in 2013. Hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. I think we have time for one more question. This one comes from Jim, who wanted to know, what is an effective way to neutralize adversaries if they don't want to meet with you?
Tim, you want to take that one?
Oh, that's a fun one. It's interesting. It touches a little bit back to a point earlier. Those internal advocates are key. Understanding who truly is, and that really becomes a study for us of, okay, well, what is the behavior? What's the behavior of an advocate look like? What are the things you can see, hear, know about an advocate that helps you hone in on who's really going to be that person? Things like, are they providing you with connections to people? Are they providing you with intel that you might not otherwise be able to get? A level of candor and sharing that they're willing to have with you are great behavior signs of an advocate. So to back to the question then, knowing who those advocates are and leveraging them to help either make that connection with some folks who are maybe a little more adversarial towards you, or potentially helping you work around them. There's sometimes you're not going to get a person on board with you, no matter how much you try. They may be 100% sold on your competition, and then you're not going to change that. So what can you do to effectively neutralize them? And that's where I think knowing those advocates and how strong and how much influence they have are absolutely critical.
Yeah, Tim, I think I'll just add one point to that. When we can't get access to a high influencer adversary, you kind of have two options. When you're looking at your picture and your picture's right, they have high influence and they're not as supportive of you, you have two options. Either do what Tim said, try to find somebody in the picture that can help us go talk to them on our behalf to try to neutralize them in some fashion, or talk to your advocates to try to find ways to eliminate them from the picture. And we can often eliminate them from the picture. And I'm not talking about kind of talking to friends we have in New York City to take them out of the picture. Sorry about those people who are in New Jersey and New York. We're removing them from the picture. But no, what I'm really talking about is how do we remove them from the picture by simply making other people more important? And that's where it requires we have to cast a broader net. And if we've only casted a limited net of people, it's going to be very difficult to do. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. That is all the time we have for today. So thanks again, Steve. Thanks to you, Tim, for being with us and sharing this wonderful content and answering all of these questions.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you guys for the outstanding questions. And our contact information is here. If there's specific questions you want to go ahead and send over to Tim or myself, we're both happy to invest some time responding back to your questions. And you guys will get copies of this. And if you want to go out to our website to actually do the e-learning module for the influencer snapshot, the competitive snapshot, they're out there. We were giving them away for free during this pandemic because we know that it's important. So go knock yourselves out.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, everybody. Up next, we have George Donovan and Wayne Amand joining us from Allego for their session on breaking through sales and marketing silos. So, George and Wayne, are you with us?
Yes, Elizabeth. This is Wayne.
Awesome. Great to hear you. We are looking forward to your session. It'll start here in about 12 minutes. So everybody go grab whatever you might need. Take these 12 minutes and we'll meet back here very shortly.